Hi, I'm Kirsten Cole, and welcome to the 20th anniversary World Care Center documentary. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us during a time of year when so many of us reflect back. I work for WPIX TV as a reporter and anchor, and 20 years ago, I was downtown just after those towers came down. We all have a story that connects us to this incredible time in our nation's history. But right now, we want to talk about not only looking back, but also looking forward to how incredible we can be when we all come together. This is a story of one group of volunteers that not only responded in the moment, but carried the lessons learned from 9/11 forward to continue to serve others. World Cares Center.
That was an attack on New York, and it was very personal. I went into the Javits Center. That was the holding area. It was where medical supplies were being packaged and redistributed to Ground Zero. Some of it was with rescue people that were coming from the pile and coming back up to us. So we did some care and triage and crying and things like that. Then I met Lisa, another volunteer like me. She took it on herself with great success to become a coordinator and a liaison between all of the groups. And I knew that I was willing to stand beside her and work with her those days. So having that coordinator and it being Lisa and whatever groups she was speaking with, there was more coordination with what was going on down at the pile.
I met Lisa as a National Guard member that was deployed to Ground Zero on 9/11. Everybody kind of honed in and we really took over the entire Jacob Javits Center. I saw Lisa in the basement kind of organizing and stockpiling supplies for all of those volunteers that were there and that were brought in to support Ground Zero. She had a direct connection via cell phone to people that were inside Ground Zero. And she made that connection with these people and these locations to set up a distribution point here very early on, within 36 hours of the event unfolding.
There were doctors, there were nurses, there were school teachers, there were people from all walks of life. Not a lot of them had any disaster management experience, but they wanted to help. We soon realized that there was a tremendous emotional toll. You saw firefighters and construction workers realizing that their brothers were not going to be found. And we knew we needed to carry forward. We knew we needed to maintain that support structure. We started to brainstorm on what was the very first thing that we needed to do. We began to formalize September Space.
Lisa Orloff is with a group that counsels people post 9/11.
Some of them are afraid that there's going to be another terrorist attack, and they're feeling as if they're not empowered.
I'll never forget that night. We'd all been involved in some way or another, or some people hadn't been immediately involved, but they wanted to be. It was during those times that the idea of September Space actually first came to life.
September Space was basically a place where people could come together. They had first responders, family members, survivors. It was a safe place where they could come and talk about what they were feeling, talk about what was going on in their lives.
And everybody wanted to do something. Everybody wanted to help. The first thing I said was, of course, I was willing to volunteer my time to be the project manager of the fit out for September Space. I reached out to contractors, and Structurton was a big component of helping fit that space out. Everybody pitched in, their vendors provided door frames and doors and hardware and flooring material and paint. It was very unique. It was very much atypical of what everybody else was doing. It offered relief to those who attended the programs to discuss and speak and basically detox from what they had seen working down on the cleanup.
I actually started September's mission 2 weeks after losing my husband, Michael. He worked in Tower 2 on the 84th floor for Eurobrokers. I was advocating on behalf of all those who lost their lives that day. So back then we did a lot for the children. We would do dinners with families. Now, 20 years later, we're all still a big family.
I was actually one of the founders of the World Trade Center Survivors Network. Lisa offered us a sort of an organizational home with what was then September Space, not only physically using their space, but also having access to their programming. The connection with what's now World Care Center lasted for several years. It was extremely helpful to me personally. That ability to make those connections through World Care Center was very, very important. One of the things I learned is that knowing you're not alone, learning about how other people were affected is really an important part of the healing process.
I was a 19-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. We were all doing 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week at Ground Zero, attending numerous funerals of members of services, and I was just wrung out. And I took advantage of the services that September Space offered. I remember taking part in art therapy. I had never done anything like this in my life, and it was I was shocked that I even had the wherewithal to avail myself of this practice.
While World Care Center was busy running the September Space Community Center, it was also gathering lessons learned from rescue workers and volunteers who responded at Ground Zero, as well as the vast number of experts who came to share their experience and support. WCC combining these lessons to create a curriculum that would ensure citizens, responders, and government could more effectively work together when disasters strike. It is the training the World Care Centers provides day in and day out that ensures that we are ready to respond together whenever.
After 9/11 disaster, everybody wanted to get involved to help. I mean, everybody wanted to pitch in. And Lisa, as well as others, were able to realize the fact that having the resource of hands and boots on the ground wasn't the problem. It was organizing them and teaching future leaders.
We had been working on trainings that helped close the gap between what citizens know and what responders know, and what citizens know, and how do official responders look at spontaneous volunteers as a resource rather than another asset that they have to manage somehow.
Nobody really thinks about all those neighbors who come out when the event's over to help out their neighbors. And so one of the things we do is we go into communities ahead of time and we teach them how to keep them safe.
The command structure and the safety training, which is all part of any incident command structure, is very important.
The New York City Police Department was exploring the National Incident Command System, NIMS. It was very dry and a bit complicated, and Lisa had published an excellent book. She outlined a lot of examples and curriculum in straightforward language. That was a great boon to the success that I had in sharing this with the members of the New York City Police Department. It made sense. It was not academic or government language. It was about where are you in it and where is it in you.
It was learned by doing. Here's this resource. How was it used after 9/11? Who used it? What did we learn from that? Okay, now let's apply that in a broader context.
Knowing who's got that character, the temperament to fight through when there's death and destruction all around, it's very rare. You have to find those people in advance and put those folks in a position to lead others.
World Care Center was asked by FEMA to come and speak with the community and share a roadmap based on how September Space was created to help New York City recover. WCC's work continuing in partnership with the University of New Orleans, meeting with and supporting community leaders who would apply World Care Center's 9/11 lessons learned to their own recovery. WCC worked locally within the communities struck hardest, first by the earthquake and later by a cholera outbreak. The Haitians they trained would become a permanent, locally led response team, helping their community for years to come.
Had the experience of being the only person, seeing somebody and assessing them and making recommendations, which I really love. That's a very pure use of a nurse's skill. So when we went to Haiti, it was back to that. The first time we went down, we had a physician, we had nurse practitioners, we had RNs, we had medical assistants, and we had an EMT. So we had like this whole spectrum. While we were responsible for organizing ourselves, it was that acceptance of everybody has something to offer. When you're on the ground and you see the partnership of the people who are living this disaster, older men, younger women, people of all different ranges of experiences who just wanted to help, were given the training and the support to be able to do that.
My mom died in the earthquake. So I really wanted to get resources to Haiti, and that's how I met Lisa.
I was in Haiti doing all of this after the earthquake, but World Care Center allowed me to grow as a leader. I went beyond just trying to take care of the immediate things for my family and my friends and going out into the communities. I didn't know I had that capacity to help develop me as a human being.
She was working through her grief by helping others. She had all of the community connections, and I had the training, and I had physical resources and people who wanted to donate and items that could be distributed. And we began to work together and work in force.
I was already working with the UN, but I felt like we needed more help. That was another calling for me. My family will be involved, and I would have the room to train anybody I felt like they were capable of doing what I wanted them to do, which I didn't have with the UN, by the way. I felt like it was really a blessing. We found that with the World Care Center.
World Care Center was called upon to help coordinate volunteer cleanup efforts across the state of New Jersey in coordination with NJ 211 and the Office of Emergency Management. Upon realizing that more help was needed, they would develop a muck and gut curriculum and training for NJ CERT and local groups to recover their own homes.
Muck and gut is what people do when their homes are flooded. You go in, you basically muck all the muck out to prevent mold growth, which can be quite toxic and damaging.
World Care Center, working in coordination with New Jersey VOAD, we were able to address those needs of people that weren't being helped by FEMA for whatever reason. Long-term recovery groups were critical to help out everyone, and World Care's team made a difference.
Hurricane Irene was a terrific storm in our community. World Care Center was kind enough to come and train our group of leaders who then went out and ran crews to do the cleanups.
One of the first organizations we worked with was Burlington County CERT, and we trained the CERT members, Community Emergency Response Team members, to do muck and gut operations. And they had some really good resources, and they began to help their own community recover.
Relationships is the key with any type of disaster, and the World Care Center epitomizes that you have to continually build relationships to make a difference in disaster response and recovery, but more importantly, building resiliency throughout the process.
The Great Sendai earthquake occurred in northern Japan on March 11, 2011, Japan's main island, which caused widespread damage on land and initiated a series of large tsunami waves that devastated many coastal areas of the country. World Care Center initially worked together with local partners to gather soccer equipment and materials translated into Japanese to help the children in evacuation centers heal from that trauma. This began a long partnership with Peace Boat, a Japanese volunteer organization that would later come to support World Care Center's response during Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Matthew. Superstorm Sandy was the deadliest, most destructive, and the strongest hurricane of the 2012 Atlantic hurricane season. Its storm surge hitting New York City on October 29th, flooding streets, tunnels, subway lines, and cutting power in and around the city. World Care Center sprang into action, setting up volunteer reception centers in Brooklyn, Far Rockaway in Queens, and Staten Island. Over the course of the relief effort, World Care Center trained and coordinated more than 22,000 volunteers who mucked and gutted, preparing them to be rebuilt, and delivered millions of dollars in donated relief supplies.
I can't overemphasize how critical it was for World Care's operations to be part of the long-term recovery with Hurricane Sandy.
World Care Center afforded Staten Island that opportunity, and not only recover, but build that resiliency and be better equipped, better trained, better prepared in the future if and when any type of crisis comes to bear.
And that was really a pivotal moment when Sandy hit and the Rockaways and Staten Island were washed out. And I said, this is the moment where you're gonna step up and you're gonna try to do something. Lisa had asked us to run an incident management team out of St. Gertrude's Parish in East Rockaway to start mucking them out and doing mold remediation, training volunteers. They'd come in by buses or by their own cars, via New York Cares or other groups to come down to help. We had to teach them how to be safe. We outfitted them and we had to bring them back, make sure that they were all safe and accounted for. A credit to the World Care Center to be able to marshal the goodwill of people to help survivors. It's a really phenomenal thing. They see their basements cleaned out, which was once a rubble pile. Families crying and saying thank you. It takes a certain type of person to be in a volunteer organization, a nonprofit, to do that type of work. It takes special people to do that.
It is not just about giving someone a blanket or a pillow. It's really about understanding the whole nature of how to help that person recover and rebuild their lives. It's a real journey of recovery, and that's what WCC prepares the people that they train to offer in the communities where they live.
An estimated 2.1 million people affected by Hurricane Matthew, and 1.5 million people needed humanitarian assistance. World Care Center's Haiti team quickly assessed the damage, gathered and trained local leaders, and worked together to address one of the most critical needs: clean water. This relief effort pulling together the New York City team, the Haitian team, and partners from Peace Boat in Japan to deliver home water purification systems to the hardest hit villages and provide training in their use and cholera prevention.
The guys took a stand. They did the assessments on a daily basis and they sent the reports back. They were our security, they were our logistics, but they'd never taken the role of leaders. And to see them do that, yes, I was very proud.
It was a moment in time where we said, it works. It doesn't only work in New York City, one of the most resourced cities in the world, but this works in Haiti. We had our Haitian team in front, delivering the water filters, training everyone, going from house to house, hut to hut, and making sure that those water filters were in place and were working and that were being used. And it was amazing to see.
World Care Center joined the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences in deploying to Texas to provide training and personal protective equipment to workers and volunteers responding to the crisis. World Care Center continues to help Texans recover by providing emotional resiliency training in the communities that continue to work on the front lines.
It was crazy to canoe down these major streets into the kitchen, which again had a foot of water in it. Just so surreal to have that much water land in Houston.
World Care Center brought into it was a whole different dimension, not only for me personally, but the whole community. And so the training that was being given to these folks and just the hunger for the information was incredible. I also had the experience of actually driving down to where Hurricane Harvey first came on land. We were out in the middle of open field and around some people coming in to get that information. What the World Care Center has done is a great launch pad for any community to be able to take that information and to run with it.
We were going from corner to corner where day laborers were hanging out and providing respiratory protection training for them and giving them respirators so that they would be able to protect themselves from the work, from the hazards that they would be faced with the work that they were doing.
6 months or so after Harvey hit, World Care Center provided emotional resiliency training. And the people who took that course were faith-based leaders, mental health experts, volunteer coordinators. So it was a great class. There's a lot of emotion when it comes to responding, and it can wear on your body and spirit. So that training is incredibly important.
World Care Center once again springing into action to assist local communities recover, training local community groups and students to conduct cleanup efforts and delivering needed supplies.
The situation was very difficult, not only because of the power, because of the whole aftermath, the destruction, the infrastructure that was not working, besides the power, because the water systems were not operational in many places. Food was not as accessible as it would normally be. The whole situation was really messy. I was able to work with Lisa hand in hand with what we're training the people and teaching them what to do to put their homes back in a better situation. Because of the flooding, the temperatures were very high, the humidity was skyrocketing, and those are the perfect conditions for mold to grow very quickly. And that's something that that will affect the health of the people, even threaten someone's lives, especially in the cases of people that have respiratory conditions like asthma or others.
You went into areas that FEMA could not get to. And so we understood that humanitarian organizations, government agencies had an important role, but it's the community leaders that sometimes could get really deep into areas that FEMA or large humanitarian organizations could not.
It was an ongoing effort. It was recurrent. Lisa Orloff was basically every other week coming to the island, while also other efforts were being developed in places affected by Harvey. I can tell you that having that feeling that people are interested in helping, people that may not necessarily have a connection with this island, with Puerto Rico, they want to help. And that has a lot of value.
Because we were the local hands and feet, we were able to help them because we were trained. And many of them were in tears because they felt seen and they felt heard.
That's something that speaks a lot about what's in the hearts and souls of the people. In putting yourself in the shoes of someone that you do not know. And so I had the honor and the opportunity to be part of that.
The Boots on the Ground exercise provides safety-minded individuals from all walks of life an opportunity to come together and practice life-saving skills, develop connections with other responders, and learn new ways to help their communities prevent and recover from disasters. This is what FEMA calls the whole of community that is needed to come together when disaster strikes. World Care Center trains them and keeps them safe.
The Boots on the Ground exercise brings together organizations, and it brings together spontaneous volunteers who show up to learn. And so that's very similar to what would happen in a real disaster situation.
Boots on the Ground exercise is the culmination of the trainings that we give through our Disaster Volunteers Academy online in-person classes. And we try to recreate different scenarios. So we teach people how to wear PPE, the masks, the gloves, suits, how to do mucking, gutting, removing some of that wasted or moldy housing materials and dispose of it properly and doing things safely.
The partnership between John Jay and World Care Center was really so important to my students. It really felt like we are changing something, and students also were so excited, and they really felt, that they were part of something bigger.
It brings our entire community together. We're better trained and we're better prepared to work together, and no other group I know does that.
The Iron Skillet Cook-Off began as a thank you to all the responders and volunteers. It was the idea of one of the responding firefighters. When asked how WCC could thank everyone that came out to help, he said, "We don't want a thank you, we want a competition." And so it began.
So here we had all the firefighters jockeying for first position. It was definitely very competitive, but at the same time very friendly. There's certainly, you could see the camaraderie amongst those firefighters.
We've continued to do them year after year, and they continue to be an event that represents the spirit of New York City. It was a wonderful way to bring everybody together, who include both professional responders and civilians that step out and step up every day to help.
In March 2020, World Care Center was among the first organizations to distribute free N95 respirators to thousands of nurses, doctors, firefighters, and volunteers assisting the most vulnerable. WCC developed several COVID-19 safety trainings with the support of NIEHS and distributed them free of charge online through the Disaster Volunteerism Academy. WCC continues to provide free PPE and training to keep communities and their responders safe.
COVID-19 was, in a lot of ways, similar to the 9/11 relief effort, and in so many ways, very, very different. We were so ready, we didn't even know it. We had N95 respirators, we had Tyvek suits, we had gloves, we had goggles. We had all of this equipment pre-positioned in our warehouse, and now we could take that and literally distribute thousands upon thousands of personal protective equipment to frontline workers. World Care Center was on the ground immediately distributing N95 respirators that were scarce.
I'll never forget pulling up in front of a hospital and literally the chief physician coming out almost in tears, thanking us, being like, you have no idea, we were down to fumes basically with our mask supply, and you are literally saving lives, because otherwise we would have been going maskless.
I have done a great deal of PPE training during the pandemic. It used to be something to teach someone how to wear an N95. Now it's hard to find anybody that doesn't know what an N95 is, and I'm really pleased that I did my part to help that.
I'm Laura Kavanaugh. I'm the first deputy commissioner at the FDNY. In that role, basically I make sure things run in the background well for our first responders so they have what they need in the field. I just want to thank World Cares for everything they do for the community, for everything they do for our first responders. I want to thank the firefighters that are here today and that have given their time and their energy to support such a great cause.
When I think of the World Care Center, the one word that comes to mind is passion. The passion for doing the right thing and the passion for ensuring that volunteers are part of the system and are prepared to do the work in disasters.
September Space was almost like the Little Red Schoolhouse. It was a repository for what I needed to do what I did. I have a great sense of appreciation and an obligation because of that. It's now an international system connecting people to people and connecting skills to skills, because everybody wants to help. But the real truth is nobody was ever really taught how to help. That has to be managed. That's what the World Cares organization provides.
What you have also with WCC is you have identification that these folks have with their neighbors that is really special. And that brings to the table a whole other level of compassion and empathy.
The most important thing was coming away with the feeling of, no matter how bad life gets, you see the best parts of humanity come out. And if there's any light in a disaster, that's it. It's something that breeds hope.
I think the work that they do is immense. I am really grateful for having them in my life and in my student life.
We have lived something most have not, and we would not want them to live that because it's a nightmare. So we're good at making sure that we can give our knowledge to those people and help them.
World Cares was really well organized, knew what they were doing as far as getting a medical team on the ground. That was very evident when I went with another group later. What I had learned through World Cares was universally applicable.
To learn about myself and learn about the things that we still need to do. Today, we still need to have organizations following World Care Center's model, bringing people together.
20 years ago, we responded with compassion, with caring, with selflessness. We came together and we helped strangers. And strangers came together from around the world to help us recover. We're honoring those that we lost. We're honoring our first responders. We're honoring our ready responders. And we're honoring all of you that make that possible.